every time when we are trying to do a new exercise, we just have a single class with the main method. Okay, that's actually quite a special case where you put all your programs in the same class. But in reality, you actually got so much code, you would rather just separate them into different classes. Okay, that's something we're going to show you today, just as a first example. So there's something called object orientation in Java, which means somehow you have to analyze your problem first and see what kind of objects, what kind of entities you're going to manipulate for your application. Let's make a very simple example first. Okay, let's create a project, and then I'll show you. So number one thing to really note, there's a class, there's an objects. So these are two different ideas. I'm going to show you how to distinguish between them. So let's create a project for today. CSE114, Spring 16, and then Week06, Lab2 for today. And let's create a class. Okay, just call that person, and with no main method. Okay. So now later, let's say for your assignment 2 and your assignment 3, you're actually going to have maybe more than one classes, or maybe you have 5 classes. Only one of them will be the one that has a main method. Okay, the main method will be where you want to execute the code. But for other classes, you're only defining some templates like classes, like a template for objects. Okay, let me just have a simple example. Let's try it out together. With no main method there, say finish. Okay, so now, as I said in the handouts, let's try to define what a person is. Let's say a person, like us. Let's say we have a simplified version. Every person must have some common attributes. We call it attributes in class. Like what kind of properties a person has. Let's say a person has an age, and also a person has a nationality, let's say. So the age can be either 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So let's declare integer. So you can see we don't have the main method anymore. So we're declaring variables at a class level. So it's called attributes. So attributes that are common to all persons. Okay, so now we have some age of type integer, like that. And also nationality. Let's say it's just a string. Okay, so we have 2 attributes. And now, there is something called constructor. So now I'll just write it down. Constructor for instantiating. So that's actually a word you're going to see very often in this course. Instantiating, which simply means you're creating an instance from the person template, from the person class. We'll see that in a moment, how you can do that. For instantiating the person class. Okay, so in Java, whenever you want to define the constructor, you have to first of all start with the same name as the class, always the same. So you have a person class, so the constructor must have the same name. So now we're trying to define a method, basically. Remember, on Monday I briefly said the method is simply has a name, has some input parameters, and then has some something to define inside. Let's see how we can do that. So now, so person is going to take some input here. So let's say whenever you want to create a new person, you have to say what his age, what their age and nationality is. Okay, so now we're saying we're going to take an integer age, let's say new age, for example. Let's try not to have the same name as the age over here, otherwise we have a clash. And also string type, and that's also new nationality. Okay, so we're going to show you in a moment, very soon, how you can use this constructor in a moment. So now we're trying to define how you can initialize a person, instantiate a person. So now we're saying that whatever new age you give to me, I'm going to use that to assign to this age here. Okay, so I'm going to say age is assigned to new age. Okay, and then I'm going to say nationality is assigned to new nationality. Okay, that's your very first method. So all you got to know is, for now, This method, it is called a method because the method has a name, which happens to be of the same name as the class name. So in this case, it's called kind of constructor. The constructor is going to take two values. So the first value is called new age of type integer, and the second value is called new nationality of type string. We're going to use these two values to somehow initialize age and nationality for the person. Okay, let's see how we can use that. We can see that already. So we're going to need a new class. Okay. So now let's create another class. And this is going to be our main program to run. Okay. So let's say person tester. And now we do need a main method. So click on the main method here and say finish. Okay, so over here, you'll be amazed. This is the first time you don't have to declare any scanner. Okay, so just we're going to manipulate the person object, person class. Let me write some comments for you. Create a new person gym. Okay, how do we do that? So now, this is the syntax in Java you have to eventually learn very soon. So first of all, we say we're going to create a person variable. So let's say P1. So P1 is declared as of type person. Pretty much like when you say integer I, you say I is declared to be of integer type. So now we say P1 is actually a person. Okay, similar idea. So now equals like a sign to some. So when we say new, that means we are creating a new object. I'll explain what the object is in a moment. When we say new, a new object, and then person here, and we're going to say, let me see. In the person class, remember we actually have this method here. The first input is actually an integer, and the second input is a string. Okay, so now let's say Jim is of age 50, and then Jim like that. So this is said to be an instance of class person. So many things to note. First of all, to the left of the equal sign, we are declaring a variable called P1, and P1 is of type person. To the right of the assignment symbol there, we actually have new person 50 Jim. So whenever we say new in Java, that means we're creating a new object. I'll draw a diagram for you in a moment. And then we say this object is going to be instantiated using the person constructor for the person class. And the first input, the first argument is going to be an integer 50. And the second argument is going to be a string, just Jim. Okay? So now let me draw you a diagram here to make it more vivid. So let's say, so what we're doing is we say that P1 is basically pointing to some person objects. Okay? If you go back to where we defined what a person is, remember person actually has an age, it has a nationality. Okay? So now let me just do this. A person has a name, also it has a nationality. So now for this P1 here, we are setting the age of the person, age the name. That was my bad. Let me change something here. Sorry, just got myself confused. So age 50, but now it's nationality. Remember, nationality here, let's say British. So that's better. So now, let me change the name of the variable to be Jim. Okay, that's what I meant to say. Sorry about that. So now we have Jim over here, the name of the variable, and we have age and nationality. Age is fine. So age is 50 for Jim. Nationality is simply just British, for example. Okay, so basically that's an object of type person, and this person here has age 50, and it has nationality British. Okay, it's Jim. Let's just try another one. We can create as many instances of the same class as you like.
So you can say create another new person, Jonathan, for example. So now you can say again, person Jonathan is assigned to new person. So let's say slightly older, let's say 60, and then Canadian.
Okay, you can see pretty much we are trying to call the same constructor, but now the argument value are different. So now you can see the first argument. I don't have my remote actually. But you can see the first argument we pass. In line number 5, we say 50. In line number 8, we say 60. And the second argument there, in line number 5, we say British. In line number 8, we said Canadian, right? We give different arguments value to instantiate different objects of the same class. So now what happens after that is we have Jonathan here, and then there's also a person object. And in this case, because every person has an age and has a nationality. But now, for this particular person, he has a different age and has a different nationality. So now he will be 60 and Canadian. Okay, so now we can see that first of all, you can see now we have two person objects over here. Both of them has the age and nationality. They both contain these attributes. However, the values for the attributes are different, right? You can see for the age, one is 50, the other one is 60. And for the nationality, one is British, the other one is Canadian. This should make a real life sense, right? Like every person has an age, has a nationality, but their values might be different. Okay.
So now, let me show you another thing. What's going to happen if you try to run a debugger? Okay. Let me just put some print statement for you, and then I'll use a debugger for you. System.out.println. So let's say, how do I get the age of Jim? Jim, yes. So if I say Jim, let's say Jim's age is plus. Give the name of the variable, and then we have the dot notation, which I'll explain more on Friday. Okay, age. Actually, this is something we saw in the very beginning lecture, maybe in the beginning of semester, about a month ago. Okay, so the dot notation is a unique feature in Java. Okay, so you can say the name of the objects and then the name of the attributes. And later on, we can use the dot notation to say, also you can put the name of a method as well. But we'll get there in a moment. And also, we can do something similar. System.out.println. Jim's nationality is Jim.nationality. Okay, so now let's do something very similar for Jonathan. You can say system.out.println. So now we'll say Jonathan's age is. So now you can see rather than, we're still going to ask about the age, but we're going to ask the age from a different person. So you're going to say, want to guess what I'm going to write? Exactly. Jonathan, the name of the variable dot age. Exactly. And then system.out.println. Jonathan's nationality is Jonathan.nationality. Okay, so one thing to note, you can see we have .age over here. We also have .age over here. But the left-hand side of the dot is a different object. So here we say, what's the age of Jim? And here we say, what's the age of Jonathan? So they will give us different values. Okay, and similarly, what's the nationality of Jim? And what's the nationality of Jonathan? Let's do the output first. Okay,
right? Not too surprising here. So the ages of the two persons are different, but the nationality of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the nationality of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. So now we can see the ages of the two persons are different. and the nationalities of the two persons are also different. They could be the same, but they could also be different. Yeah. So now, let's have a look at the debugger to see what's going to happen.
So it's going to be even clearer. So now let's put a breakpoint, let's say over here in the first line, right before we try to declare and instantiate a person object. Okay, if we say run debug as Java application, if you do that, so now we are over here. Okay, so make sure you're in the variables panel. So as soon as we actually, so now, remember we used to do just step over here. So now we'll try something new. It's something called step into. Okay, that's something we'll try. So step into is to say, now I'm trying to create a new person object by using the constructor of the person class, which we define. Okay, if I go back to Java here, you can see in the person class, we actually define this constructor here to say, whatever new age you give to me, either 50 or 60, I'm going to set it to this person's age. And whatever nationality you give to me, it can be Canadian, it can be British, I'm going to set that value to that attribute there. Okay, let's see what's going to happen. Okay, let me go back to debug here. It's certainly a very different way of thinking. So you just gotta, yeah, don't worry, we're gonna repeat these things many times. So this is the very first time. let's see what's gonna happen. So now we are here. So now we're gonna say step into. If you say step into, what's gonna happen is we're going to go into this person constructor. Okay, if you say step into now. So now we are now in the person class, and now we are here. You can see new age and new nationality. New age is 50, and new nationality is British, right? So now you can see something called this. We'll talk about this keyword in Java in about 2 weeks' time. But basically, it's talking about this current object we are trying to instantiate, which is going to become Jin over here. We're going to set this person object's age to be 50, and this person's nationality to be British. That's what we want to do. Okay? So now, if you expand the this over here, you can see currently age is 0, nationality is something called null, which I will talk about as well later on in the course. We have not set them yet, not yet. But eventually, we'll set the age to be 50 and set the new set the nationality to be British. So now let's go on. Let's now step over. So now let's execute this line here. After this line, we're going to assign the new age, which is 50, to the age of the objects. If we do that, so now you can see age now becomes 50 over here, right? And now let's execute the next line. After that, the nationality becomes British. Okay. So now we completed line number 5 over here. So now we have got an object called Jim. Over there, you can see the age of Jim is 50 and the nationality of Jim is British. Let's do it again. Let's say now that's just a printout. So now we got another line. So Jonathan is assigned to new person 60 Canadian. So now if we step into, we are now stepping into the same person constructor. But now we are trying to instantiate a different objects. You can see new age is now 60 rather than 50. And the nationality is Canadian rather than British, right? So now we are trying to, so the current object we are trying to initialize is going to become his age being 60 and his new nationality being Canadian eventually. If you say step over for line number 9, after that, you can see his age becomes 60 over here, right? And after line number 10, you can see nationality becomes Canadian. Okay, so we have just observed how Java actually instantiated 2 objects for us of the same class by calling the same constructor. Okay. Okay.
Any questions so far? Is it kind of clear, the picture? So we define one class called person. And that person class, we define 3 things.
in the person class there, first of all, we define an attribute called age, which means every person should have an age. Also, we define another attribute called nationality. And after that, we'd say this is the constructor for creating a new person objects. And whenever you want to call this constructor here, you have to pass two inputs. So the first input value here must be an integer. And the second input here must be a string. Okay? And here, inside this method here, we're trying to say how you can do with the parameters, right? We say whatever new age you get is going to be used to assign to this age attribute here. And whatever new nationality you get here is going to be assigned to this nationality attribute here. Okay? So now, let's do a little bit more. Let me see what I have. Okay, let's now define more methods in the person class to give you more feel. So let's say we have, so basically, every time when you define class in Java, there are only two things you're going to define, either attributes or methods. Attributes are rather simple. They're just variables. But for methods, let's say this. So let me just write it out and I'll explain to you. Void change nationality and string new nationality. Okay, that's just one input. And then we say nationality here is assigned to new nationality. Oh, sorry for keep coughing. Wow, cannot help. So basically this method here, we're saying don't worry too much about the void for now. Void simply means the method is not going to return any value. Okay? Certainly it wouldn't make sense. I'll try to explain that more systematically on Friday. Okay? But for now, let's just take that for granted. Okay? So somehow we are trying to define this block of code for which you can simply say, I can say Jim.change nationality to something else. I can also say Jonathan.change nationality to something else. Okay, we'll see that in a moment. And whatever value you pass here is going to be used to assign to the nationality attributes. Okay, let's see how that works. Let's go to person tester and see how that works. So now, let's say Jim.change nationality. Let's say we convert him to Korean, for example. In that case, first of all, you can see kind of very similar to when you say Jim.nationality over here, right? So we'll say Jim. So I want to change the nationality of some person, and this person is Jim. Okay? So now, let's do something similar. Let's say Jonathan.change nationality. I'd say also Korean. So now, if I repeat the same line over here, when I say Jim's nationality is, used to be British, so now it's actually going to print out a different value. Okay, let's see why. Okay, so now let's do some comments here. Let's say system.out.println change Jim's nationality to Korean. Okay, and let's say right before we do that method call there, I will also say change Jonathan's nationality to Korean. Okay, and now finally, let's also print out Jonathan's nationality. Copy this line here and do that. And Jonathan's nationality is something. Okay. So now let's give it a try. If you launch the program here, first of all, you can see the first time we call nationality, we say Jim's nationality is British. But now, after we change Jim's nationality to Korean, so now Jim's nationality is actually Korean. It's been changed already. Similarly, we actually said here Jonathan's nationality is Canadian, but after that we say it's actually Korean. How does that work? So we got to see that in the debugger, how these things are being set up. Okay, let's again put a breakpoint somewhere. Can we put a breakpoint, maybe not in this line here, cancel that. Can we put a breakpoint here, around line number 10, right before we change the nationality of Jin, right before that. Okay, let's see how that changes that. So now if you say run debug as Java application. Okay, so now let's have a look. Currently, you can see we have an object Jin. If you expand that object here, you can see the age is 50 and the current nationality is British, currently. Okay, so now we would expect to see, let's say after we say Jim.change nationality to be Korean, and this attribute here is going to become Korean rather than British, right? How do we observe that? So now rather than saying step over, we're going to say step into. We want to go into this particular change nationality method in the person class to see how that changes the attribute value of Jin. So now let's go, let's say step into over here. So now we are in the change nationality method here, right? So now have a look. Let me show you in the debugger. You can see that's the current object here. You can see the age is 50 and the nationality is British, right? That's before the change. So now and the new nationality here is the Korean, right? So now if I execute this line by saying step over, so now nationality becomes Korean, okay? That's how we did it. Okay, so now let's go to Jonathan's case. So now we are in this line here. So we are calling the same method, but with different objects. So it's Jonathan rather than Jim. Okay, if you step into it, so now we are now in the same method. For the same method here, you can see the current object here is actually age 60 and nationality Canadian. Okay, so now we're going to change from Canadian to Korean. Okay, so now if you do step over, it's going to change that to Korean over here, right? That's from the debugger. Okay. Any questions so far? That's your very first exposure to classes and objects. Okay, and you can take my words. Later on, you're gonna write methods much more complicated than that. But later on, not now. So today is a very gentle introduction, so that can help my lecture on Friday. Okay, let's try something else. Okay. Let's say we would like to change the age of the person. Let's go to the person class. Let's also say void here without knowing too much about why. And let's say something called get older. Okay, which does not take any input. Okay, so basically for methods in Java, you can choose to say how many input value you want to take. It can be 0, can be 1, can be 2, can be 3, doesn't matter. So in the case of change nationality, you have to know what the new nationality is. That's why there's one input. But to say get older, let's say we always get older by 1 year when you pass your birthday, right? So now, in this case here, we say the age of the current person, it can be Jim, can be Jonathan, can be any instance. It's going to be assigned to age plus 1. Okay, so you can see that every time inside this method here, inside the method, we are trying to change the values of the two attributes, either age or nationality. Okay. So now, let's go back to person tester. Okay. So you can see now, Jim's age used to be 50. Okay, so now when we say this, Jim dot get older, just that. You can see we were trying to call the method get older, which does not take any input parameter. Okay, that's why it's empty here. And then we'd say we want to get older for Jim specifically. After that, you can actually print out Jim's age again. So you can copy this line here, and then paste it here. And we'll see what Jim's age is again. So it should be from 50 to 51. Okay. Similarly, so let's say here we can say Jonathan dot get older. So we're calling really the same method, but on different objects. Used to be Jim getting older, but now Jonathan getting older as well. So now we can just print out this line again. So Jonathan's age is whatever the current value is for the age. Okay. So now let me just print some line here to help you. System.out dot print line. So right before we say Jim dot get older, we'll say Jim gets older. And similarly, over here, right before we say Jonathan dot get older, you can say Jonathan gets older. Okay. So now I will run the debugger in a moment. But if you simply launch the program, it's going to say, well, Jim's age was 50, but now after Jim gets older, now his age is simply incremented by 1, 51. Okay, similarly, Jonathan's age used to be 60, but now after he gets older, his age is 61. Okay. So now let's see the debugger again. Okay. It's actually quite important. Can we just remove this previous breakpoint? Can we put it in the line where you were trying to call Jim.getOlder, right over there? Okay. So now let's say again run debug as Java application. If you say that, so now you can see currently Jim is actually the age is 50. So after we execute this line here, Jim.getOlder, we should expect age to be incremented by 1. So from 50 to 51. So now let's see how it can become accomplished. So if you say step into, and now we are now in the person class, so now we are trying to execute the getOlder method. You can see now the object refers to Jim. And now you see age currently is 50, but we're going to increment the age by 1. Okay? So if you execute this line here, you're going to have age becoming 51. Okay? Let's do it again. If you step over, so now let's see how Jonathan gets older. So now we're here, right before we say Jonathan that get older. If you step into, so now you're again in this getOlder method, but now the current object here is actually age is 60 for Jonathan, and it's he has been converted to Korean already. So now you can see the age is going to be incremented from 60 to 61. Okay, so now you would say step over, and now you can see indeed it's being incremented to 61. Okay, go on. That's why 61 has been printed out to the console. Okay. How are we doing? Maybe 50%, maybe, or more than that. Good, more than that. Okay, cannot be 100, right? I'll be surprised if you got 100%. Okay, maybe 50, 60. No. Okay. So sorry, I shouldn't push you on that. So maybe we'll just do maybe 1 or 2 more methods, and I'll let you go earlier today. So basically, that's kind of the pattern you actually have to do for the rest of the course. We have to define more than 1 classes according to what classes, according to what template we're going to have. And then later on, we're going to have a single tester class to manipulate the objects. Okay. Let's do just one more. And if you turn to the 3rd page, so now you can see that over there, you can also go through the descriptions on 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. So that's basically what I said, but now just in words. You can go over them before Friday's lecture. So now I think we'll be well prepared for Friday's lecture. So now let me just get 1 or 2 more examples for you. Okay? Let's say this. We want to know if the person
is actually a middle-aged person. So let's define this. If the person's age is more than 50, then it's considered as middle-aged. Let's say, okay, 50 or, yeah, 50 should be fine, 50.
Okay, this is how we do it. I'll write it out first, and then I'll explain in a moment. So we want to know whether or not the person is middle-aged. It's like a true or false. So we have to say somehow we have to return a Boolean value. Okay, I'll say Boolean here, and that is middle-aged. And I don't need any input here. Okay, for example, I can say Jim dot is middle-aged, and Jonathan dot is middle-aged, something like that. Okay, so now if I say this, Boolean here, a variable is middle-aged, is simply assigned to if the age of the person is greater than 50. If it is, it's going to be true. Otherwise, it's false. Okay? And then there is a special keyword you have to learn in Java, which is something called return. So which means once we figure out if the person is actually middle-aged, we have to return this value back to whoever is using the method. We'll see that in a moment. We'll see that. Returned is middle-aged. Let's try this first. Try this first to get a feel. Okay. So basically, you can first thing to note, we see void, and Boolean. In the case of the void method, so that means the method does not try to return anything. Okay. But now in the case where you have non-void method, it can be Boolean, it can be string, it can be integer. That means you're trying to return some value. Okay. Let's see how we can use that. Okay. Let's say this. Let's say after we created Jim objects over here. First of all, we want to know if Jim is middle-aged. Apparently he's not, right? 50 is actually not strictly larger than 50. So now you can say the following. System, let me say this. Boolean, Jim is middle-aged. It's assigned to, we're just asking if Jim is middle-aged. Okay. Let me just write a print statement here. System.out.println. Jim is middle-aged. Is that true or false? And I'm going to say depends on the variable here. Okay, one thing to note after you have finished typing. Okay, so over here, we are trying to call this is middle-aged method on the object called Jim. Okay, and now we are expecting this method here to return like a true or false back to us. Whatever value that's returned, either true or false, we're going to store that into this Boolean variable. So that's what's happening. Let me say that again. Look very puzzled. Okay, that's good. Whenever you really feel puzzled, just give me some facial expression so I can actually know I need to explain again. So basically, when I say Jim dot is middle-aged, I'm actually going to call this method here. Okay, and remember, let me just go back to the method itself. The method there is middle-aged has, this is something called a return type, which means whenever I'm trying to call this method here, the method itself is going to give back to me some value, which I can catch and store somewhere else. Okay, in this case, this middle-aged is going to return some Boolean value for me, to me, and then I can get that Boolean value and store that somewhere else. Okay, so now if I go back to the person tester here, when I say Jim dot is middle-aged, it's going to give me either true or false. And then after I get this true or false, I'm going to store that true or false in this Boolean variable here. Okay, that should be good enough. So now, let me do another example here. So now, can we just, let's say after Jim gets older, which means he gets from 50 to 51. So now he should no longer used to be Jim is middle age should be false, but now since he's 51, so that should be true. So let's do the following. So let's say Jim is middle aged. We have the Boolean variable already. Let's reuse it. Is reassigned to Jim dot is middle aged. Okay. At this point here, because Jim already got older, so now his age should be 51 rather than 50. So 51. Yeah, we'll see that in a moment. Okay. So now after that, we can say system.out.println. Jim is middle aged. And try to print out either that's true or false over here. Let's have a look. First of all, the output, and then we'll see the debugger. First of all, you can see initially Jim's age is 50, and Jim is middle aged, false. And then we have Jim, after Jim gets older, his age becomes 51. So now he is middle aged, being true. But how does this happen really? Let's see. So now let's see this. Let's put a breakpoint so we can remove the previous one. Can we put a breakpoint over here? In the line where we were trying to call Jim.is middle aged. Okay. So let's say run debug as Java application. If you do that, so now we are stopped in this line here, right before we try to call this method here. So now if you say step into, so now we're going to step into is middle aged method. Okay, so if you step into it, so now we're here. Okay, so now we're in Jim's objects. Jim there, his age currently is 50. Now he hasn't gotten older yet. So now we're going to compare age, which is 50. If that's 50 larger than 50, it's not the case. So we're going to set its middle age to be false. So if you step over, you can see its middle age is false. So now somehow we calculate this value here, but we have to return that value back to whoever is using this method here. Okay. So when I say whoever, I'm talking about this line here. This line is trying to use this method here. So whatever value we get from Jim.is middle aged, we're going to store that Boolean value into this variable here. Okay? So in Java, you have to use some explicit return statement there. Let me get back here. So that's why we have to say return is middle aged. In this case, it will just be false. If you do that, so now, if you actually go again, you're going to see that Jim is middle aged has been set to false. Okay, let's go on. So now, let's go to after we say Jim gets older. So after Jim gets older, you can see Jim's age is now 51. Okay, so now we are trying to call the same method. Jim is middle aged. Okay, let's step into it again. If you step into it, now we're calling the same method. So we're going to assign the truth of if the current age of Jim, which is 51, is that really larger than 50? It is. So we're going to assign true to this Boolean variable here. And then we're going to return this true back to that line over there. So now, we're going to return true from this method call here, and then store the true in here. Okay, so now we're going to execute this line. So now you can see Jim is middle age now becomes true. Right, okay, it used to be false, but now it becomes true. Okay. So, I think, what should I do? Maybe just do a few more methods to get you more experience. Okay, maybe just another 5 minutes. Okay. Let's say we want to do another. Let's see which one is more interesting. Yep. What about something? Let's say a person also has a name. Let's say first name and last name. In this case, we're going to add more attributes to the person. Okay. So now we can have, let's say, string first name and also string last name. So now every person has a first name, has a last name, has an age, has nationality, 4 attributes. So now we will just have to increase the number of input for the person constructor. So now to initialize a person, we will pass the first name, last name, age, and nationality. Okay, so now let's say this string first, I'll say F name, like that for first name. String L name for last name. Okay, and I'm going to do a very similar assignment here. For whatever F name is, I'm going to assign F name to first name. So first name is assigned to F name. Last name is assigned to L name. Okay, just 2 more attributes for 2 more assignments over here. Okay, so now let's go back to person tester here. So now you can see there are 2 lines that do not compile. The first line is, we used to say new person, and then we pass the age and the nationality. But since we just changed the way the person should be constructed, there should be 4 inputs rather than just 2 inputs. So that's why it doesn't compile anymore. We have to give more information in order to instantiate a person. So now a first name, what about just Jim? Let's say Davis, and then 50 British. Okay, let's say for Jonathan's case, first name, Jonathan, what about Cooper? And 60 Canadian. Okay. So now, let's say after let me just print out the first name and last name. System.out.println Jim's name, so that'll be first name followed by last name. Jim dot first name plus, let's say a space here, plus Jim dot last name. Okay, you can see pretty much like how we access age and nationality, pretty much the same. And make sure you put a semicolon after that. And we're going to copy this line here and do the same for Jonathan. So after we initialize Jonathan here, we can say Jonathan's name is going to be Jonathan, that first name, and also Jonathan, that last name. Okay, let's have a look, and then we'll see the debugger, and then we're done. If you run this program here, you'll see Jim's name is Jim Davis, okay, and Jonathan's name is Jonathan Cooper, over here. So let's see how the debugger works. Okay, so let's just put the breakpoints now in this line here, right before we try to construct the instance, the objects. So now if you say run debug as Java application, so now it's right before we create Jim, so we don't see the variables yet. That's normal. And now if you step into it, we're going to step into the person class constructor, and we're going to see the new name, the first name being Jim, Davis will be Davis, and then new age and new nationality. Okay, so now if you step into it, you can now see that F name to be assigned will be Jim, L name to be assigned will be Davis, new age 50, and new nationality is British. Okay, so now you're gonna see that currently the age, first name, last name, and nationality for Jim has not been set up yet. Okay, so now we're going to set them one by one. So when you say step over, first of all, we're going to set the first name to be Jim over here. And the second line, we're going to set the last name to be Davis over here. And we're going to set the nationality to be British. Yeah, somehow I just closed that window there, but you kind of get the idea. Okay, I can stop here. Okay, anyway, but you kind of see the point, right? You can actually run the code and see how the object attributes value will change, right?
Any question about this? I wouldn't expect you to get 100% for sure. Okay, maybe at least 60%, 70%. Okay, get a big picture. Good. We're actually going to talk about objects for the rest of the course. So try to read the background materials on page 1 and 2 before Friday, and then also try to look at exercise as well. Okay. Yeah. Okay. If you have no questions, you can leave now. Okay. I'll see you on Friday.
So what does the quiz cover?
You mean for Friday?